The year is 1739. In colonial America, there were free people, indentured servants, and slaves. £6 to £9 British bought a man or a woman without skills for a 4-year period. Skilled workers on the block brought in £10 perhaps, if the bidding was lively. The year is 1806. The place, Philadelphia. The defendants, a small group of shoemakers, cordwainers they were called. Their crime, combining in an attempt to raise their wages, improve their conditions of work. Guilty, said the court, of violating the law. Unions of working men are illegal. Guilty as charged. This was a time when men were imprisoned for debts, when to be unable to pay your debts was a crime, and under this harsh penalty, it was not the well-to-do who suffered. In the new factories that came with the Industrial Revolution, women and children were the workers. Public schools, almost non-existent. Some voices, the poet Shelley was one, did speak out against this cruel plight. Disraeli referred to the two worlds, the world of the rich, the world of the poor. America's Walt Whitman chanted a song of democracy. Bryant upheld the right of men to join unions. And in Parliament in England, opposing the death sentence for workers who dared to protest their lot, Lord Byron declared, "You call these men a mob. It is the mob that labor in your fields and serve in your houses, that man your navy and recruit your army. Never have I seen such squalid wretchedness. And what is your remedy? Death. Is there not enough blood under your penal code?" Now the year is 1830, the place, New York, and wage earners were beginning to find their voices too. Unions, even though illegal, were organized in most cities, and working men's political parties were making demands for social justice. The 10-hour day, an end to child labor. In New York, Frances Wright, the woman reformer, together with George Henry Evans, Robert Dale Owen, Thomas Skidmore, led the campaign which established the public schools, broadened the right to vote, closed the debtors' prisons, finally. But slaves continued on the block. "I tremble for my country," Thomas Jefferson said, "when I reflect that God is just and cannot sleep forever." Some helped them escape through the Underground Railroad to Canada. Others, fighting slavery, gave their lives. John Brown. "Had I so interfered on behalf of the rich, it would have been all right. To have interfered on behalf of his despised poor, I did no wrong. Now, if it be deemed necessary that I should forfeit my life, I say, let it be done." The date, January 1st, 1863. Abraham Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation. All persons held as slaves are and henceforth shall be free. Distant dreams of the youthful American labor movement beginning to come true. Land grant colleges established for farmers and wage earners. A homestead law enacted giving free land to settlers. Now for the first time the railroads, built by Chinese and Irish laborers, reached from the Atlantic to the Pacific. A new metalworking industry came into existence, and unions, local combinations of workers until now, were growing into national bodies. William Silvers, labor's first national figure, labor's champion. I love this union cause. I hold it more dear than my family or my life. I'm willing to devote to it all that I am, have, or hope for in this world. And this union cause thrived. The National Labor Union was formed. A National Labor Party met. Then, after the Civil War boom, the crash, the hunger and violence of the great upheaval, strikes by desperate men and state troopers called out to break them. In Pennsylvania, Irish immigrant miners, denied the right to belong openly to legal unions, had organized a secret society, the Molly Maguires, to protect their claims to justice as workers. The evidence on which 10 Mollies were convicted was found to be false, 75 years after they had gone to the gallows and were hanged. Frank Farrow introduces Terence V. Powderly to the annual meeting of the Knights of Labor, their creed, universal brotherhood. And in 15 years, 700,000 members had rallied to that idea. The Knights launch a nationwide campaign for an 8-hour day. Then at Chicago, May 4th, 1886, 4 men killed by armed strikebreakers at the McCormick Works plant. In the evening, without warning, police attack a workers' protest meeting. There is shooting. A bomb is thrown. And before the clash is halted, 10 lie dead, 100 injured. 6 years later, the innocence of the Haymarket anarchists was revealed. But again, too late for the executed, and for the Knights of Labor, destroyed with them. The first Labor Day, and to lead the March of Labor with the first plan for successful union organization, 3 men appeared. Samuel Gompers, earning his way as a youth, reading books aloud to cigar makers while they listened and worked. The other 2, Peter McGuire of the Carpenters Union, Otto Strasser of the cigar makers. Said Strasser, "We have no ultimate ends. We fight only for immediate objects." 1881, they helped to create a federation of organized trades and labor unions. 1886, it becomes, with Gompers as president, the American Federation of Labor. But the road for workers was a hard one still, and in more than one trial, defeat. Now they are pitted against the Pullman Company, makers of railroad cars. On trial is Eugene Debs, his prosecutor, the Attorney General of the United States. For the defense, the famous Clarence Darrow. The issue before the court: can a law intended to regulate business be used to authorize labor injunctions? The answer, yes. Debs went to jail, the strike was lost, the union destroyed. The turn of the century, and great waves of immigrants coming to America. Italians, Greeks, Irish, Czechs, Poles, Romanians, Russians, Jews, 1 million a year. Seeking freedom, they found slums. Seeking wealth, they found the sweatshops. But if justice did not walk their streets, Jewish immigrants found they could work for it through the garment unions they organized, enriching practical union goals with a new sense of industrial and social democracy. The turn of the century. Pope Leo XIII emphasizing the right of workers to join trade unions. President Teddy Roosevelt warning of the growing hold of monopolies, urging their regulation. J.P. Morgan, banker, putting together U.S. Steel, International Harvester, the great corporate trusts. William Haywood, head of the IWW, the industrial workers of the world, the Wobblies, organizing the unskilled. Henry Ford, engineering the modern assembly line, applying the principle of mass production. John Mitchell, helping to establish the United Mine Workers Union. These were among the dominant figures. The 20th century opens. Labor force, 29 million. The work week, 57 hours. Average weekly wage, $13. Out of the locomotive repair pits came the Machinists Union and the Murray Hill Agreement, one of the first national contracts, establishing the 9-hour day. Another step towards the 8-hour day that the Knights of Labor, a generation earlier, had sought in vain. The winds were foul, the work was hard, from Liverpool docks to Brooklyn Yard. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. But Johnny couldn't leave her, under the law. In 1895, Congress had reduced the penalty for desertion, made it illegal for officers to beat seamen, guaranteed sailors the right to demand safe ships, the right to collect their pay. But the Supreme Court said the law was unconstitutional, just as it said a law forbidding child labor was unconstitutional. After 20 years pleading, Andrew Faruseth, head of the Seamen's Union, won a hearing before Congress. And the La Follette Act of 1915 ended slavery aboard the nation's ships. (1912), the Clayton Anti-Monopoly Act. The labor of a human being is not a commodity. 1916, the Adamson Act. The great goal of labor comes into view. An 8-hour day for the nation's railroads. The new freedoms advocated by President Woodrow Wilson. A war labor board gives workers the right to organize. 1918, the First World War ends. But in 1919, no peace in the steel towns. Living in hovels, pitifully underpaid, exhausted from an endless 12-hour day, sometimes 7 days a week, once again the men sought deliverance through a union. 24 craft unions banded into a single committee. Responding to appeals in 29 languages, 100,000 workers flocked to join within a year. But the companies refused to negotiate. Said the New York World, the Pennsylvania State Constabulary, the dreaded coal and iron police, has been concentrated at commanding points. In the end, violence. The strike lost. 20 dead, 18 of them union members. Said a Protestant church commission, U.S. steel is too big to be beaten by 300,000 workers. 1920, the labor force, 42 million. The work week, 50 hours. Average weekly wage, $35. 1924, for the AFL, a difficult period. Corporations attacking with harsh injunctions, paternalistic welfare plans, employer-dominated company unions. William Greene, succeeding Samuel Gompers, becomes president of the American Federation of Labor. Senator Robert La Follette, Wisconsin's great progressive leader, runs for president of the United States with AFL support. Senator George Norris of Nebraska, architect of the Tennessee Valley Authority, leads a lonely struggle for public use of national resources. He and New York Congressman Fiorello LaGuardia draft the Norris-LaGuardia anti-injunction law, ending the use of federal courts to deny workers their rights. October 29, the stock market crash, and by 1930, the Great Depression had set in. Herbert Hoover in the White House. Of a labor force of 49 million, 16 million unemployed. Average weekly wage for those with jobs, $23.25. For the others, the bread lines. Factories stood empty, while hungry men searched for work, and on farms, the food surpluses rotted. Communities of shanties, Hoovervilles they were called, sprang up on the outskirts of cities. And here, in the most degrading squalor, families lived. By 1932, the Depression found millions facing foreclosure. Desperate, demanding jobs and relief, hunger marchers, needy war veterans converged on Washington. A grim administration reacted. It ordered federal troops to drive them out with bayonets and tear gas. Then, at the edge of disaster, with a banking system in collapse, a New Deal. We have nothing to fear but fear itself, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt proclaimed at his inaugural. In the rebound of spirit, 1.5 million workers joined the labor movement within the first 6 months. Along with the New Deal came industrial unions, organization by industry, not only by craft. Led by John L. Lewis, the CIO was born, the Congress of Industrial Organizations. The miners, the garment workers, the printers, the oil workers, and the newspaper men led by Haywood Broun, whose writings articulated the hopes of working people. Surveying the ferment among industrial workers, John L. Lewis declared, "He is a madman or a fool who believes that this river of human sentiment can be dammed." December 1936, telegram to Governor Frank Murphy, Lansing, Michigan. "We, the workers, have carried on a stay-in strike over a month to make General Motors obey the law and engage in collective bargaining. Stop. The introduction of the militia, sheriffs, or police with murderous weapons will mean a bloodbath of unarmed workers. Stop. We have decided to stay in the plant. Stop. Corporation spokesman demanded that Governor Murphy order state troops into Flint to drive the men out with bayonets. Instead, he used them to maintain order, while union and company negotiated. Finally, in mid-February, Murphy's Lincoln-like patience prevailed. An agreement was reached between a new union, the UAW-CIO, the auto workers, and General Motors, America's largest industrial corporation. When the wave of sit-down strikes had subsided, industrial unions were firmly seated at the bargaining tables. Almost. Here in Chicago, on a sunlit Memorial Day morning, a peaceful parade had formed to demand that Little Steel recognize the right of its employees to belong to a union. The huge steel companies, called Little Steel, had continued to defy the law, refusing to negotiate through a union. Their defiance erupted in bloodshed. In Chicago, on Memorial Day, 1937, 10 men were killed, all union members, dressed in their Sunday clothes, all shot in the back. The grim truth of the massacre would never have been known, but for the efforts of a Senate committee presided over by young Bob La Follette, investigating corporate violations of civil rights. From such disclosures came the New Deal reforms, the Social Security law, pensions, unemployment insurance, a ban on child labor, the 8-hour day and the 5-day week, and at last, the Wagner Act, guaranteeing workers the right to belong to unions, to choose in government-supervised elections the union to represent them. By 1941, Ford and Little Steel were finally brought under the law. The labor force had grown to 53 million, and union membership, 14 million men and women working under signed collective agreements. Philip Murray, successor to John L. Lewis as president of the CIO, directed the organization of steel, negotiated the first Ford contract. Under Murray of the CIO and William Green heading the AFL, the two labor bodies learned to work with one another, as all America closed ranks during the national mobilization of the Second World War against Hitler's Germany and the militarists in Asia. On the home front, union members turned their energies to the national emergency. In the shops and factories of America, production soared. Through their unions, wage earners, ordinary men, free men, purchased defense bonds, donated to blood banks, helped organize industry councils, participated in rationing boards and economic councils, helped mobilize the economy. 1949, and a new union, the Communications Workers of America. Of its 400,000 members, 65% were women, marking the entry into the ranks of organized labor of a new kind of wage earner, the first big union after the Newspaper Guild to cross the line from blue collar to white. Now a new word to bedevil the worker, automation. Devices to replace human hands and judgment, starting and stopping themselves, able to manufacture, calculate, detect flaws better and faster than human hand or brain. The answer of the unions? Plan for full production. Retrain workers losing jobs through automation. Provide dismissal allowances, relocation payments, and earlier retirement. Shorter hours, longer vacations. In effect, to guarantee a new security to the wage earners in America. This was part of the vision of Philip Murray, who once had expressed it in its simplest terms. Carpets on the floors of workers' homes, pictures on their walls, and music in their lives. Unity, December 1955. AFL and CIO become AFL-CIO in its 127th year. Organized labor, 16 million strong. Under the joint chairmanship of AFL President George Meany and CIO President Walter Reuther, a unified labor movement meets in its first convention. Now the 16 million become a part of 60 million workers throughout the world, members of the International Confederation of Free Trade Unions, seeking a modern version of the justice a small band of cordwainers sought in colonial Philadelphia a century and a half ago. Remembering the inch-by-inch advances, the hard-won betterment of their lives, and the sacrifices ordinary people made, and the men who died for these beliefs. Remembering the rights and freedoms won out of a past that was cruel and unhumane, when there was not even kindness. Aware of the bright futures, and remembering still the long apprenticeship, the debt, to all those nameless men who loved this Union cause.